back, everybody, to another Mitch and Brad's Movie Show, episode number 4 here. Very excited. We're, again, keeping things diverse. We're looking at some different movies here. Definitely a change of pace from last week, talking about The Matrix. We're talking about a movie that is going to get the spotlight here in this episode that also had some meta qualities to it, and we'll get to that more in a second, but in my opinion, this one did the meta parts way better, but we'll get to that at the end of the episode here. But we're here talking about scary movies. We're talking about the Scream franchise. We're talking about people who burst onto the scene with the first movie. So, Brad, what are you looking forward to discussing this episode?
I mean, not to give too much away, but I feel we have opposing views on Scream. On the new Scream, so I am looking forward to really delving into that.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it. So obviously, to kind of start this episode off, our opening question, opening discussion topic, whatever you want to call it, our question is, what is your favorite scary movie? Because of course we have to ask this question because we're talking about the Scream franchise. It's the question associated with this movie, with this franchise. So what's your favorite scary movie? And Brad, I'll let you start this one off.
All right. So in coming up with this, my favorite scary movie, I didn't pick because there's another topic that we will be discussing at some point, and I'm going to save all my comments for when we discuss it. That's a tease for a future episode. So I went with a movie that isn't really a scary movie, but it creeped me out when I was a kid, when I first saw it, and it still creeps me out to this day when I see it, and that's Field of Dreams. If you think about Field of Dreams, dude, it's a ghost movie. It's through and through a ghost movie. When Ray Kinsella, when the daughter comes in and she's like, "Dad, there's somebody out there," and he goes out and Shoeless Joe's just standing out there, that is creepy as hell, dude. And then the scene that really always got me was when he's walking in the street and you see Doc Kinsella walking down the street, and it's old-timey, the world kind of just traveled back in time and everything. That always gave me shivers. If you actually boil it down, Field of Dreams is not just one of the best movies ever made, in my opinion, one of the best sports movies. It is a genuinely creepy movie.
Sure. So with this question, we were kind of asking people and asking ourselves, favorite scary movie doesn't necessarily mean favorite horror movie. This just could be a movie that you just found creepy as a kid, creepy now, or just something that not necessarily as a horror movie, but just kind of got to you a little bit. And Field of Dreams, I could definitely see that. I did actually watch this again not too long ago. And yeah, again, looking back at some of these scenes, it almost does have a ghost story, a spooky story kind of feel to it. So certainly the voice whispering as well. I know you didn't just mention that, but you gave a lot of other good examples from the movie. But the whispering voice as well, it just, again, context is everything. And if you take out some of the music or some of the shots that paint this as a more kind of hopeful, magical movie, this could definitely be painted as a scary movie.
It's a good point, man. I should look at the internet because you know how they recut trailers on the internet to make like The Shining into a family comedy? I wonder if anybody's ever made a Field of Dreams recut horror movie. And if not, I may have to get on that.
Without even looking, I guarantee you somebody else on the internet has already got on top of that. If not, huge missed opportunity. The internet that comes up with all these clever things, riffs on different things, clever edits. If somebody hasn't done that yet, then the internet isn't really doing its job, because that seems like a layup.
Without a doubt. So with that out of the way, let's get to the top into yours because it's a solid suggestion.
Sure. So with this, I did go a little bit more horror, scary kind of route, but it's not my favorite horror movie. But my favorite scary movie of all time is a movie called The Strangers. And people might not know about this one because it did have a long waiting sequel that did come out a few years ago, The Strangers Prey at Night. But The Strangers is a movie from the mid-2000s, and its premise is super simple. It's a very simple home invasion story starring Liv Tyler, Scott Speedman, and some masked intruders that just break into their house and kind of mess with them psychologically and eventually murder them. And the reason it's my favorite scary movie is because just the shots are just so simple yet so terrifying. It almost kind of brings to mind Alfred Hitchcock, where there's a quote where he said, "I could show you a shot of two people eating lunch at a cafe and suddenly a bomb goes off and it's sudden and it's violent and it's scary and it just catches you by surprise. Or I can show you the two people eating at the cafe. I can pan down and show you the bomb underneath the table, and suddenly there's this tension and there's this apprehension and fear and all these different emotions. And I feel like that definitely is kind of captured in The Strangers, just these lingering shots of the intruders just out of the sight line of the protagonist. And it's a really scary movie.
That is a good one, man. I saw that one in theaters, and I like that it was inspired by a true story. And then when you hear what it's inspired by, it's like, well, any movie is inspired by a true story. But it definitely had great marketing with that, because I think they relied heavily on that inspired by a true story. But it didn't delve into slasher territory, really. It never went for an easy scare, I guess. And it was creepy. And I think that's what makes the best scary movies. A scary movie to me is something that genuinely you're like, you shut off the lights to go to bed and you walk into the bathroom and you're like, I'm going to look downstairs real quick because there might be somebody in here. Versus, just a slasher movie. You're like, that was good. But like Strangers, genuinely creepy movie. I enjoyed the sequel as well. Not as solid as the original, but still pretty good.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes it so scary, is that this could happen to anybody in real life. Just a simple home invasion plot where strangers invade your home just at the edge of your sight line, and you feel like somebody's watching you and you're kind of looking over your shoulder. And to me, that's what makes a great scary movie, is because it's something that kind of sticks with you after you watch it, that makes you look over your shoulder. And if you're alone in your home at night, it makes you start to hear noises and see different things out of the corner of your eye. And to me, those are the best scary movies that stick with you. A little bit different from horror movies, because those have a little bit kind of different things going for them. But those are my favorite kinds of scary movies.
Exactly. Yep. Anything that's creepy. What more can you say?
So obviously this is a very scary movie themed horror, themed episode we got going here. So it's kind of centered around Scream and scary movies and horror. So we decided to make our main segment about the man who pretty much, with some help from the rest of the crew and the director and of course some other people, but people that we praise on the show before are the writers. And this man, Kevin Williamson, definitely made the first Scream happen due to his writing, and definitely helped shape the first Scream and other movies that would come after it. So for our main segment, we're going to be talking about Kevin Williamson, and it's going to be called Their First Movie, because believe it or not, this was his very first movie. So let's take a look at Kevin Williamson in Their First Movie. So here in our main segment, we're calling it Their First Movie. And it's essentially, we're going to be looking at different people on the production crew, whether it's a writer, director, actor, whoever, and just their first movie that they were really a big part of, and their impact on that movie or the genre or their career, or just what have you. So Kevin Williamson is a screenwriter, and his very first movie was the first Scream. And a lot of people would say that Scream really changed the game. It changed the horror genre, it changed the slasher subgenre. And Kevin Williamson is mostly to thank for that, with his really meta commentary on the characters in the first Scream, who essentially know they're in a horror movie and know the rules and what to do. And it really changed the game going forward.
Yeah, I mean, the opening scene of Scream, I think goes down as one of the best openings ever. I rank it up there with your Saving Private Ryan, D-Day even. Some people will probably say, how can you compare Scream to Saving Private Ryan? But it's kind of like you have to take each thing for what it is, for its own thing. And the opening of Scream set up the movie Scream perfectly. And it really is one of the best written scenes. And even to go a step further, by casting Drew Barrymore in that scene, she was a main part of that marketing. She was a massive star at that point. they killed her off in the first 10 minutes of the movie. Never been done before. And so just that opening scene alone, you could dissect for hours about how genius it is.
Yeah, so they put Drew Barrymore in the marketing and the trailers and all these other things for the advertising of this movie. And then to have her be killed off in the first 10 minutes, it really set the tone for the rest of the movie that nobody was safe. It really got audiences' attention as soon as the movie's opening scene was over. This was a great way to start it. And that little, that move of writing her off that early in the movie, a person like Drew Barrymore, and the way that he did it, Kevin Williamson, the screenwriter, was just a fantastic move.
Yeah, and like our opening question today, that phrase became part of the zeitgeist. What's your favorite scary movie? It became, people joked about it. People would, if you called somebody on the phone, it'd be the first thing you say. And it's weird how writing or something like that works, where just a simple question, just a simple line, filmed great, written great, performed great, becomes something 25 years later that is still part of pop culture, still out there for the world, not just a throwaway line or to something like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the point in that opening scene where it kind of switches, where this might not be an innocent conversation, that the character might be in danger. I love it. This line of dialogue still gives me chills to this day when I'm watching the movie. But the caller mistakenly says, Drew Barrymore asks the caller, why do you want to know all this? And the person on the phone says, because I want to know who I'm looking at. And she goes, what did you say? And he says, I want to know who I'm talking to. And she's like, that's not what you said. And that's the point. That just gives me chills to this day. That line of dialogue that he says over the phone by accident, whether it's on purpose, I guess it's a little bit open to interpretation, but that is just a fantastic bit of writing, a fantastic piece of dialogue that I just love watching to this day.
Oh, yeah. And then, opening scene out of the way, then you kind of launch into this teeny kind of movie or whatever. And in all honesty, 96, I believe, was this when this came out. This was still kind of the first R-rated teeny-esque type movie where, kids would be buying their, fake ticket to sneak into this movie, because this really launched that whole genre of teen-based, high school-based slasher movies, horror movies, thriller movies, or whatever. And, Kevin Williamson would even continue that trend by, he also wrote I Know What You Did Last Summer. He also wrote Teaching Mrs. Tingle and all those other kind of movies like that. But Scream was the launch of it wasn't just a horror movie launch or a meta movie launch. He launched a million different genres within one movie.
Yeah, you could definitely tell there's so much of his influence out there from this very first Scream movie. And like you just alluded to, this was far from the only thing that he worked on. This was true to the name of the main segment title here. The first Scream was his very first movie that he really was a big part of, that he wrote and, had a big contribution to. But, he was far from done after this. Like you just said, he wrote I Know What You Did Last Summer, that came out shortly after. That was another meta teen slasher that had some smart writing to it, regardless of what you think about the rest of the movie. But people definitely praised that aspect of it. And, he would just go on to do more in that kind of subgenre that he kind of influenced with the first Scream.
Without a doubt, yeah. And then he came back for Scream 2, which I don't know if you want to get into a little Scream 2 talk at all or anything, but I thought Scream 2 was a worthy sequel to Scream 1, still written by Williamson, and obviously Wes Craven came back, so...
Yeah, so I think people pretty much unanimously agree that before this new Scream that came out, that we'll talk about here at the end of the episode, that Scream 2 was obviously the best Scream sequel that came out after the original, which... of course, it's impossible to top the first. It's like we just talked about last week with The Matrix. Yes, the sequels are good in their own right, but it's just, you can't come anywhere close to the original because it's just so good. And Scream 2, I think it's a good sequel. It's, like I said, it's definitely better than the other two after that. But again, it's just so hard to top the first. And I still think the writing is still pretty sharp. It just, the Scream franchise really cemented its kind of specific nature with the sequel, where it's a meta teen slasher where there's always going to be a mystery about who the killer is. And there's going to be some, scary deaths and just some suspense, and the characters know the rules. And it just really kind of put in place those rules for the franchise going forward about how each Scream movie would kind of look and feel after that.
So I think that was what was great about the Scream movies, which was they took the slasher genre, which Wes Craven had created essentially, or maybe not created, but really perfected with Nightmare on Elm Street. And then you have the Friday the 13th movies, all kind of supernatural-esque type things or whatever. And you combine it with kind of TV serialized drama or, cop shows, whodunit cop shows. And this was kind of a movie that brought them together so that you're watching the movie and you're kind of like, well, who's the killer? Who's the killer? And that bridges this gap between the TV world of whodunit cop shows with serial killer type movies like your 80s style movies. And I think that helped him. And when he transitioned into like his TV role, which maybe Dawson's Creek isn't exactly what you would consider somebody who wrote Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, transitioning to, but it is one of the most successful TV shows I think created. It's people still just talk about it to this day.
That is true. It's one of these quintessential teen dramas where if people are debating about the best one out there, that Dawson's Creek is one that they talk about, one that maybe set the foundation for other ones. So Kevin Williamson was a big part of that. But, in keeping with things that he did in the horror genre specifically, obviously he was a big part of the Scream franchise going forward from the first and the second one on. And he did return as an executive producer for this new Scream in 2022. And when you say executive producer, that could mean a lot of things. It could mean they just kind of got a credit for that they were actually involved and had a lot to contribute. So it's always a little bit hazy about how much somebody does in the executive producer role. But I think fans of the franchise are glad that he returned for this newest one. But something from his career that I wanted to highlight was another meta kind of teen slasher of another big horror franchise that he worked on was Halloween H2O. And for me, much like Scream and Scream 2, Halloween H2O in my eyes, before we got this new set of Halloween movies recently, Halloween H2O in my eyes was the best Halloween sequel after the first one.
Right on. I don't believe I ever saw H2O. I know that was Josh Hartnett's first movie. I only know that because I literally just turned in my script for the Joe Blow thing I do on Josh Hartnett about 4 hours ago. So that's the only reason I know about H2O, really, and how well received it was, because apparently, that's the only sequel of the original sequels that fans of that franchise actually recognize as like, oh, this one was actually decent, before obviously the two new ones retconned everything.
So obviously Williamson was a big presence in the Scream franchise, but some of the other things besides that, Halloween H2O, Dawson's Creek, some of these other big projects that he had his name in, he was also a big influence and a creator on the hit show The Following back in 2013 to 2015 on Fox. And for people who might not be familiar with that, The Following was essentially about a retired FBI agent played by Kevin Bacon who kind of tracks down this leader of a cult of serial killers. And normally I don't really go for cable shows, but when I finally did check this one out, I really liked it. I thought the writing was really sharp, and without even knowing who was really behind it at the time, Kevin Williamson, obviously a big name out there for this kind of genre for Scream and so forth. But I really thought the writing was sharp. The show was very well written. It was just really captivating. So this was just another project that he worked on that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I never saw that one. I love Kevin Bacon, but that one never hit my radar. But I did, in doing a little bit of research on this, you notice that his career has really taken, he's done a lot of TV stuff, a lot of good TV stuff, in all honesty. So, I mean, some people just find maybe he prefers that long form storytelling as opposed to like more confined 2 hour type movies.
That's true. And you know what? We're not, there seeing what's going on. Maybe writers like that better because it lets them just stretch their legs a little bit, and it lets them just plan things out hours at a time instead of just trying to cram everything into one condensed story inside a movie, which is around 2 hours. So maybe some writers prefer TV, maybe they prefer the movies. We don't know. We're not screenwriters, at least. Well, one of us isn't, but it's maybe Williamson does like writing for TV better. We'll have to get him on the show and interview him just to find out what he prefers.
Once we hit that magic 1 million subscriber mark, we'll get him on.
Yeah, maybe someday. But I don't think enough can be said about the guy for the influence that he's had on horror and just creating this whole meta wave of stuff after Scream, because before it didn't really exist. There were some things that were kind of a little bit meta in the genre, but this really kind of pushed it into that territory. And we're still getting projects like this, and especially in horror specifically, where characters are sort of aware that they're in a movie and they know the rules and they don't make the usual kind of dumb decisions that came in the slashers before in the 80s and 90s. So I think this definitely was like a movement that Williamson started when he did the original Scream.
Without a doubt. And it takes a lot for a writer to become a name. Not a lot of writers become names. And so it does take... You have to do something special, like the original Scream, to become a name in the writing world, especially when your director is Wes Craven. To even take 10% focus off of this being a Wes Craven movie, and people saying, well, this is also a Kevin Williamson movie, it takes that it factor.
Not even that, but just, again, for their very first movie, not even making a name for themselves in the movie business as a writer, but just in their very first movie, which was Scream for him in 1996. And that's why we wanted to highlight him in this segment, because not enough can really be said about this achievement. Your very first movie that you're a screenwriter on, and he just knocked it out of the park. It's unbelievable. It's kind of like a 1 in a million shot.
It is. I wonder why he didn't come back for Scream 3. Scream 3, a lot of people consider the worst of the original trilogies. Well, of the original trilogy, it is the worst. And that one was written by Aaron Kruger, who I am a massive fan of, because Aaron Kruger, his first movie, to go with our theme, was a movie called Arlington Road, which is my personal all-time favorite movie. Number one on my list. Anybody ask me what's your favorite movie? Arlington Road. And he's gone on to, he wrote Scream 3. He also wrote some of the Transformer movies, which I know a lot of people don't enjoy, but Arlington Road, check it out if you haven't. But I do wonder why maybe he stepped away from the franchise come 3.
I think, again, we're not in issues. We can only speculate, but maybe it was burnout. Maybe it just, the studio wanted to push out another sequel as fast as possible, and he wasn't able to meet their timeline because he wanted to take his time and get it right. I'm sure we could do our own little bit of research and find out offline maybe a little bit of what happened, but again, we weren't there. We don't know exactly what happened, but yeah, it's a shame. And, who knows, it would have been a success, but, it's crashes and burns like that really lets the franchise kind of course correct itself a little bit, where this kind of turning point where a franchise, after a bad entry like Scream 3, they could either go down the path of, hey, let's take our time, let's dial it back a little bit, figure out what we did wrong, and make the next movie better to keep people invested. Or you just have a studio that wants to just crank out sequels and they'll just get anybody to make them, and the franchise will eventually falter and possibly die one day. So I think they definitely kind of recovered from Scream 3 a little bit. Scream 4, I think, was a little bit better of a movie than Scream 3. And then obviously we have this new one here that we're going to talk about that I think was definitely better than 3 and possibly 4 as well. So it just, they definitely learned their lessons and made it better going forward in terms of the Scream franchise.
That's a hot take. I actually disagree with that. I just got Scream 4 was not very good, and Scream 5 we'll get into in a minute. But I guess to wrap this one up, Kevin Williamson, great writer, iconic, came up with one of the best first movies of a career you could possibly think of. So what say you? What are your final thoughts on Mr. Williamson?
No, I think it's great. And I really like that we're able to highlight, again, what we consider the unsung heroes of the movie industry, which are the writers. So, again, to really highlight an accomplishment like this with the first Scream movie and really changing the game, not even doing a good job, again, just changing the genre for the better, for worse. It's up to you to decide. But again, just changing it. And I don't think enough can really be said about that accomplishment. So, hats off to you, Kevin Williamson, and to the other writers out there who people don't know your names at home, but are really putting in the work and really making great movies that people may never hear who's really behind them.
There it is.
So we've covered a bunch of Kevin Williamson's work and really just praised him as a writer. So to cap off this episode, of course, we're finally going to get to the newest entry in the Scream franchise, which is Scream 2022, because again, we're just getting too tricky with these naming conventions these days, where the original was called Scream and this is also called Scream. So it's going to be tough going forward to figure out which one is which for someone who isn't a hardcore fan of a franchise if we keep up this naming convention with these things. But without further ado, we're going to dive into our review of Scream 2022 here. So finally, to cap off this episode of Mitch and Brad's Movie Show, we're talking about 2022's Scream. Not to be confused with the 1996 Scream, this new one that just came out. And, you know, before we get into it, before we do a little bit of a deep dive, we're going to give people a little bit of a spoiler warning here, a chance to click away or pause or do whatever, where we're just going to talk about whether or not we liked it in general, give a little bit of a spoiler warning, and then deep dive into it. So, yeah, we are a little bit mixed on this one. Brad, what were your general impressions with this one? Did you love it, hate it? What did you think?
Yeah, well, first off, to reiterate, click off, because we will be talking about the killers in this one, so click away. Did I love it? Did I hate it? Was I in between? I was in between. I thought I enjoyed the movie up until they revealed the killers, and then it just tanked the entire movie for me. It was just, I hated the killer reveal. That was, for me, that might have even been worse than 4. It was so bad, the killer reveal in this one. And I liked the movie heading up to it. I was enjoying watching it. The kills were brutal, man. Like, they were actually showing Ghostface just hacking away at people. And I was like, okay, you haven't really seen him just go at people. And this one was really going for broke with that. And then the killer reveal, I just hated, man. It was such a stupid reveal. And I'll tell you why, and then I'll shut up for you. But I thought the entire point of all this stuff is how the killer never dies. There's always the killer comes back for one more thing, okay? Scream 1, the original Scream. Stu, he stabbed, okay? And then he has a TV fall on him, blah, 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 blah. He could have come back. I was waiting in this one for Stu to come out from behind something as a third Ghostface, pull off the mask and say, hey, Sidney. That would have been an applause like none other in the movie theater. I get it. That's pure fan service. I'm here for fan service when it comes to these movies. But because they didn't do it, the killer reveal had no connection really to any of the other movies. Really, it was just so bad.
Definitely a hot take there. So I can tell you have a lot to say about it. So I would say that definitely delved into spoiler territory there a little bit. But I will give my general impression of it before we get more into that. So I will say I liked it. I didn't feel, I guess, as strongly about the killer reveal. I thought it kind of connected with the whole meta quality to the franchise and to this latest entry. And it was kind of a modern update, a take on, you know, why the killers are doing what they're doing. So I didn't mind it as much. It didn't blow me away, but I didn't hate it. So before Brad bursts at the seams, we'll get into spoilers here. So let's talk killer reveal. Let's start with that. So any other thoughts you want to kind of give on that?
I think it was fairly obvious that the next door neighbor girl was going to be the killer. I kind of picked up on that one fairly quick. I avoided previews and commercials for the movie, except for the very first one. So I know I read on the internet a lot of people had called her as a killer because apparently they had shown in the trailers her coming out of the house, like gripping her side, going, help me, and people are like, oh, that's fake, that's horrible acting, or she's the killer. Well, she was the killer.
Yeah, I don't think I really made any predictions going in, or I didn't really look at that many trailers or clips because, again, they seem pretty spoilery these days, and I didn't want to spoil anything for myself. So, of course, everyone has their theories. Everyone has their bets on who the killer is, and great. Congratulations to the people who called it. Hope you feel very proud of yourselves. So I really didn't make any speculations. Even while I was watching, try to guess who it was. I was just kind of like, let me just enjoy the ride, see what they got for me, and just kind of go along with these twists and turns and reveals and just see who the killer is. So I didn't really try and guess because I think that kind of alters your perception of the movie a little bit while you're watching. But again, I didn't really mind it that much. I think the Jack Quaid factor, that they cast him as one of the killers and he was the kind of caring boyfriend the whole time. I think maybe some people saw that coming. Maybe some people were flabbergasted when it was revealed that he was one of the killers. I was a little surprised. Again, I think it's going to be hard to completely shock everyone no matter who the killer was. But let's talk a little bit more about your fan service, your fan casting of the killer. If Stu would have returned for this, what have you to say about that?
Apparently, I'll be honest. I came home. I'm on a movie forum because I am a nerd, and I put that on the movie forum in a spoiler thread for Scream 5 is what technically it is, but I put that out there and I said that's what I wanted to see. I was on an island by myself. Nobody on that forum. I didn't get any likes on my post because nobody else thought that was a good idea. And I'm just like, it would have. Oh, maybe I was just appealing to the wrong people, but I think the theater would have erupted in applause if Stu comes out. If there's a third killer, first that would have been a shock. There's never been a third killer in any of these movies, so a third Ghostface comes out from behind a door, behind a wall or something, people will be like, holy crap, never been done. Would have been a nice original thing to do. And then for him to have his thing come off and him to say, hello, Sydney, like he does in the first movie. I think that's the quote, but maybe it's not. And it's Matthew Lillard. His face is probably a little disfigured from the TV smash, but they never truly showed him dead. And you could survive a TV smash. That would have made this the best one since the first, I guess. But it went from being could have been the second best one in the entire franchise to being just like 4. Good movie, enjoyed watching it, come to the killer reveal. Okay, they had to pick somebody, so here's who they picked.
I'm going to have to disagree with you there because I think when you start to write the movie in your head, it definitely alters your perception of the movie that you're given. So I think when you try to go in as clean as possible with no expectations, with no gut kind of reactions to things where it's like, oh, I wish they would have done it this way, that you don't really start kind of thinking like that and processing that kind of stuff until afterwards, that, again, it kind of alters your perception of the movie. So I don't think that would have been a bad writing reveal, a bad move for them to put that in the movie. But again, it just, it's a shame it sounded like that kind of ruined your enjoyment of this one, that it just didn't really live up to the one in your head. And, I hope that's not really a problem going forward because, again, it could really affect how people view movies, that, instead of reacting to what they're given, they have something in their head that they want to see. And when it doesn't happen, they decide to hate the movie a little bit. So I hope that didn't ruin the movie too much for you.
Well, even, I guess you go back with Scream 4, just in these types of movies, it's a simple phrase, I guess, but it's the killer has to be somebody, right? So when you get to the killer reveal, it has to be somebody you've already spent time with in the story or something. So in that regard, Scream 4 and Scream 5, the killer is, the cousin, who, at least that one was semi-related to Sydney in some way, Emma Roberts being the cousin, and then the film geek, the Rory Culkin, who's Kieran and Macaulay Culkin's brother. They were the 2 killers in this movie. And in this movie, you have the boyfriend, who, in a meta twist or whatever, when Dewey is first introduced, he says, you're probably the killer, you're the boyfriend. And he's like, I'm not the killer. What are you talking about? So, I appreciated some of the stuff. I liked the, that he was watching the movie on Netflix and everything, watching Stab 1 on Netflix and stuff. There were, I can't, like I said, I'm not going to say I didn't like this movie. I did. I like the Scream franchise. I enjoy watching it, but it does when you get to the killer reveal, and it just feels to me like they wrote a good movie, and then you get to the killer reveal, you get to the end, they're like, we just have to pick who's a killer. The boyfriend and the boyfriend and the best friend it is.
Well, again, I'm going to disagree with you on how good it was, but I didn't mind it. I didn't hate it. So I wouldn't say it really blew me away. Again, no matter who was the killer, I think it was going to be hard to really shock people and take people by surprise, because everyone has their guesses, everyone has their theories, everyone has somebody they want to see as the killer. So I think it's just, you can't please everybody, I guess, is the lesson we can take away from this. So let's move on to some of the other aspects of the movie. So, you talked about Dewey a little bit. So, what did you think of the returning cast? Because obviously for fans of the franchise, this was a big draw to see some of these veterans come back and really have a part to, tell in this story with the new characters.
So I did enjoy the new character. I enjoyed the returning legacy characters, but spoiler for Ghostbusters Afterlife, even though it's not really a big spoiler alert, it reminded me of that in that they served no real purpose in the context of this story. They came in, like in Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters are cameos at the end of the movie. It annoyed me to no end in that movie. This movie, they did it a little bit better, where they put them in the movie, like they were in throughout the movie, and I enjoyed it. And big time spoiler alert if you haven't already been spoiled, but Dewey dies in this movie, and you kind of needed that. You needed some big thing to happen like that in this movie, and even though you hate seeing it, because I love the Dewey character, I love David Arquette, I understood it had to happen. But it felt like they could have made this movie more about the legacy characters and less about the new characters. But that's just me kind of nitpicking a little bit.
Yeah, again, I think we kind of differ on this perspective, where when you have a movie like this that has one foot in the past, one foot in the future, you're definitely the one who says they need to do it more like the old ones. And I'm definitely the one that says, well, I think they gave us the vision that they wanted, and this is what we're going to get. So let's just try to do the best with what we have. So I think that's definitely, kind of, again, maybe writing the movie in your head a little bit. But again, I agree with you where the returning characters, they were just kind of there. And I think David Arquette as Dewey definitely had the most to do, and I definitely liked him the best out of the returners. And it was kind of fun seeing Billy Loomis again, kind of in the visions. I think we got just enough of him. But in terms of Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox as obviously returners too, they were just kind of there, and they had some funny moments with they were just kind of getting too old for this stuff kind of vibe, where they were able to see through some of the facade of the killers, or they were able to do certain things where they knew what they were doing. They've been there before. But I definitely like Dewey's part the best in terms of the returners. And if I remember correctly, I think at some point in the movie they do make some sort of joke or reference where for fans to take them seriously, they have to kill off a major returning character, and Dewey was obviously that one.
Without a doubt. Yeah. I agree with you on that on that aspect. And honestly, the Skeet Ulrich stuff I liked. I'm a fan service person. I think I've come to realize I want those moments, whether they make sense or not. I like seeing Skeet Ulrich in this, which, by the way, maybe you read about this. I have no idea. Was he just didn't age, or did they use de-aging on him? Because he looked exactly the same. If he just shot that without any de-aging, give me whatever creams he uses on his face, because Jesus Christ, he looked the exact same.
I will say I remember thinking that watching the movie, where did they de-age him? Did they use some kind of makeup, or did they, whatever they did? But I will say I didn't really research that. I didn't look into it further. I may do that off camera, but yeah, I think, it definitely looked like not really a day has passed, which I think was what they were going for, seeing that kind of same Billy Loomis in Sam's mind when she was picturing him. And I like that kind of wrinkle that they added to the story. I did like that she was his daughter and she was kind of wrestling with that demon of having him in the back of her head. I kind of like that little wrinkle, but that kind of is a good segue to talking about the new cast and starting with, again, Sam. I didn't think, again, her story material was bad. I was just struggling a little bit with what her character was given in terms of writing and in terms of her acting ability to convey some of the lines. I just wasn't a huge fan of her character in general in the movie.
Well, so the one thing I did like with the Billy Loomis thing was I liked that they built up that she has some secret, and Billy Loomis was kind of there before the secret was revealed. I appreciated that they didn't save that for the end. I appreciated that it was midway in the movie. They told us she was Billy's son, or Billy's daughter. Billy's daughter in the movie. I appreciated that wasn't like some build up for the end or whatever. I like that it was put in the middle. As far as the actress goes, Melissa Barea, I loved In the Heights that came out earlier this year. Absolutely loved it. One of my favorite movies of 2021. So when I'm already a fan of somebody, I go into a new movie just being a fan of them. So I actually really enjoyed her performance in this. I enjoy her. I think she's a really good actress, tremendous singer, if you saw In the Heights at all. So I was good to go on that journey with her. Some of the other actors, maybe, yeah, they didn't sell me as well because I'm not familiar with some of these people. I haven't seen them in anything. So this was the movie to kind of make me a fan of them. Some of them didn't do a great job, but to your point of Sam, that we differ on that. I thought she did a pretty solid job, but that may be flavored by the fact that I was already a fan of hers.
That's fair, different opinions, but I will say I almost like the younger sister better in terms of her actress and what she was given and the scenes that she was in. I thought she did a much better job, really just portrayed that victim personality really well, but still kind of a strong victim. So I really like Jenna Ortega as Tara, as the little sister. I definitely liked her parts in the movie a lot better than the big sister, almost arguably the main character in Sam, where you have that scene where she's kind of alone in the hospital and she's struggling to get out of bed and get in the wheelchair and get down the hall and get away from the killer. I thought she really did a great job on that, just conveying being in pain and struggling, but just like still pushing through, and just like that part I think really sold me on her acting in the movie.
She was excellent, and that's somebody who I don't believe I've seen in anything before. Maybe I have, but if I have, it wasn't like a major role I took notice of or anything, but she was really good in this movie. And I think that's a lot of these movies, like when you get to a later entry into a popular franchise like Scream 5, so a lot of times I feel like these newer actors come into these series and you can kind of see the excitement that, oh my God, I'm in a big movie. People are going to see it. You can see that in their acting. And I fully agree with you that this Jenna Ortega girl, she was great. She was the opening of the movie she was the Drew Barrymore role essentially in the opening of the movie. She did a great job in that. I mean, you were fully invested from the get-go in that opening scene, and fully agree. She was excellent. She's not one of the ones I was talking about when I said some of the other actors I didn't really enjoy. She was solid.
Right. I mean, instead of, kind of bad mouthing some of the newbies that I didn't like as much, I wanted to highlight some of the ones I liked a little bit better. And she was definitely one of them. Say what you will about, the logic of the electronic, the doors locked, unlocked, and the phone and the texting and all that kind of stuff. Like, say what you will about the logic to some of that, but I don't think you can really doubt her acting abilities in that opening scene. I think she did a good job with what she was given.
Exactly. And even Jack Quaid I thought was good. I am a harsher critic on Celebrity Children because I don't feel like they had to work as hard to get where they are. They've never worked at McDonald's, most of them. So I feel like they've had a little leg up in getting into the industry that maybe you and I, who maybe want to get into the industry, don't have. That may or may not be true. That may be me being irrational. But having said all that, Jack Quaid, I like The Boys, the show The Boys he's on, and I thought he was good in this movie. He was funny. He was good. He's a good actor. Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan did a good job with him.
Yeah, no, I definitely liked his part in this as well. I'm a Jack Quaid fan. I'm in the same boat as you, where again, you see their last name, you kind of assume that they were given certain roles, but then you see them prove themselves. Definitely in this case, some others maybe not so much, but Jack Quaid, I think, did a really good job because he conveyed two different kind of personalities, where he was the caring boyfriend for a lot of the movie and was really sympathetic and did a really good job in that part. And then when you find out he's one of the killers, and, again, say what you will, whether you liked that or not, that reveal and their motives, I think he definitely still gave it his all as an actor, as one of the killers, and was still enjoyable to watch, no matter whether you liked where the story was going with that or not.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, and I appreciated the fact that they did relate it all back to the original. I did appreciate that the twin characters were Randy's niece and nephew, and his sister came back for just a brief scene, when she was out she was in Scream 3. And then she came back for just that brief kind of intro. And in my theater, people actually did applaud that when she was on the screen for that brief period, man. So there's something to be said about fan service. But so I like those connections to the original without bringing back Randy or anything. You had like the above the fireplace picture of Jamie Kennedy and everything. And those little touches I enjoy. And one thing I did see today, which I didn't notice, was an Easter egg, which Kirby from 4, played by Hayden Panettiere, when Jack Quaid is watching Netflix on his phone, apparently one of the suggestions on the side it says interview with Woodsboro survivor Kirby. So just that little kind of like Easter egg of, oh, Kirby from 4 survived, so perhaps we'll see her in a future installment.
Yeah, so I definitely wanted to highlight them as well in terms of, again, the new characters that I like, the Meeks Martin twins, played by Mason Gooding and Jasmine Savoy Brown. I think they did a really good job as well. They were definitely, of course, the surrogate Randys for this movie, and I really liked their parts. I really liked how they were both well aware of the rules, and I thought the material that they both had was funny, and it definitely fit within the Scream franchise. And there was that moment of a triple inception where she was watching Stab, where her uncle was being played by an actor in the original Scream, and that was such a fan service moment. If you want to talk about fan service, that was definitely a funny moment that I still feel fit within the franchise and didn't really take me out of the movie as a cheap laugh. I definitely liked that moment as a fun little fan service thing.
So kind of another thing that it came out around the time that Scream 2022 was released was Kevin Williamson had talked about kind of his original plans for Scream 4 and Scream 5, which were kind of going to be back-to-back almost continuation movies, where in Scream 4, Emma Roberts wasn't going to die. And Scream 5 was going to pick up with Emma Roberts' character at college. And they were going to have a new Ghostface who knew she was the killer from 4, who was going to be stalking and terrorizing her to kind of set up Scream 5 as like this Ghostface versus Ghostface battle, which I thought was a pretty solid idea. I mean, what do you think about that idea that didn't ever come to fruition?
No, I did find that out as well. Kevin Williamson's plans and what Scream 5, some people are calling this Scream 2022. Some people are calling it Scream 5. So whenever we say either one of those, that's the movie we're talking about, to kind of clear that up a little bit. So yeah, I kind of found out his original plans for Scream 5 as well while I was kind of looking up stuff about this one. And yeah, I thought that would have been a kind of fun and interesting thing to see. But, again, some things, they just don't pan out. And, again, it's like the movies we write in our heads. Some people who saw this one and were able to react to it and then hear about that and picture in their heads, oh, that would have been the better movie. who knows? It's just like, we just deal with the one that we have. But I think that would have been an interesting way to go. And I definitely would have tuned in for that as well. And that could have led to something else, which created another sequel. So it just, it's a thread that just could have kept on going.
Yeah, without a doubt. But, the studio saw it different. And so that whole hospital scene at the end of 4 was kind of tacked on to kind of give a definitive hero story for Sydney and kill off Emma Roberts to make it a kind of self-contained type movie. And so that'll bring us to the fact that was the last Scream movie and actually was the last movie in general that Mr. Wes Craven had directed. And so the end of this movie pays tribute to that with, the movie fades to black and you just get a big 4 Wes, big part of that. And everybody knows Wes Craven was the horror master. So how'd you appreciate that? I appreciated that they did that. It's not like Wes Craven just passed away, but they recognized the legacy of Wes Craven with this movie.
Absolutely. They obviously passed away in 2015. Not recently, not super recently, but still not too long ago. So I did really enjoy that they had that little tribute for him at the end, the little 4 Wes on the screen. And it was in the original kind of font that went with the first Scream movie. And I'm ashamed to say I didn't really make that connection that there was a character in Scream 5 or Scream 2022 that was named Wes, that was played by Dylan Minnette, who I love to see him as well. And I thought his character was good in this as well. But again, he kind of got killed off a little bit early, so not quite as much to do as some of the other new characters that we talked about earlier. But I didn't really make that connection in the theater, and I'm a little ashamed to say that somehow got by me.
I picked up on that one right away. It also helped that my brother was named Wes, so that name has a whole big thing for me and everything, and I enjoy seeing the name on screen. But as soon as they said his name was Wes, I was like, it's Wes Craven, come on now. And he did die early. I appreciate that was another piece of, I guess, fan service of bringing it back. Marley Shelton, who, if anybody's a fan of The Sandlot, that's Wendy Peppercorn. She came back as the sheriff, and he played her son. Now, Dylan Minnette, you say you're a fan of. I don't know who that is apart from this movie. What else has he done?
Sure. So obviously recently he starred in 13 Reasons Why, and he's been in a lot of other things. He's been one of these people that's kind of been cast in a perpetual high school role where he's been graduating high school for like 7-8 years at this point. But I think he's a good actor. He was also in Don't Breathe, recently in terms of something within the horror genre. But I really enjoy anything he's in. I think he is definitely a solid actor in whatever part that he plays. So I did like his part in this movie. Again, not quite as much to do, so we didn't really discuss him quite as much here in the review of the movie, but I did like his character as well. And again, his death kind of tied into what you were saying earlier with this Scream was much bloodier and slashier and way more modern and gruesome than some of the other entries. And his was definitely where he got kind of stabbed through the cheek or the face. It just, that was, and the shot lingered there. That was something.
Well, I was expecting a bloody movie from this one because the directors, their movie, the movie they made before this that got them this movie is Ready or Not, and I'm not sure if you saw it or not. It is an excellent horror movie, and it is bloody as hell. It is a great movie, and you see that, and you can understand why they got that. They got the call for this one based off of Ready or Not. No question about it. Ready or Not is a phenomenal movie.
So I guess we'll kind of wrap up the discussion, this review of Scream 5, Scream 2022. Where do you think the franchise goes from here? If they do make more, if they kind of stop with this one, what maybe do you hope to see going forward? Where do you think they go from here with the Scream franchise?
Well, the movie did well theatrically. Scream 4 was not a hit theatrically, which is why you had a 10-year, 11-year break in the movies to kind of bring it back. And so this one was not a slam dunk to do well. But releasing it in January was a stroke of genius. Movies in January tend to be a dumping ground unless you have something that people want to see. And horror movies generally do well in January. And this one did very well. I can see the studio saying, give us a sequel. Where do they go? Who knows? It's anybody's guess. I want to see Stu come back.
Yeah, bring back Kevin Williamson. No, so yeah, I'm not really sure where they go from here either. But again, I'm not a writer, so I still think there's a lot of possibilities, even if I can't picture them. But again, I think they did well enough where they kind of left the door open for these new characters to come back, and I don't really think you're going to see any more of the returners going forward. I think this was one of those ones that was almost kind of like a handing of the baton where they, again, had one foot in the past, one foot in the future, and they're going to keep moving forward into the future. So I think maybe you might see some of these new characters come back in another one. I wouldn't hate that. I might go see it, again, depending on what's going on, how it looks, who's behind it. So I think I'd be excited for the future of the Scream franchise if, again, they kept the quality level at a certain point. So I think I'd be excited to see more.
I would be excited to see more. I will see a Scream movie when it comes out. Like with this one, I wasn't entirely sure about going to the theaters and what's going on in the world right now. I'm starting to get a little bit more iffy about going to theaters with the coronavirus and everything. So, but this movie was one I was like, I got to go see it opening weekend. I saw it at a less packed show. I originally had tickets for the very first show. That show was sold out. I gave up my ticket because I was like, I don't want to sit next to people. I went the next day at 1:00 in the afternoon. Nobody sat near me. It was excellent. But I had to see it opening weekend because in today's world, the internet, if you are on the internet at all, you could be looking up recipes on how to make chicken parmesan, and it'll say, here's your recipe for chicken parmesan. By the way, can you believe that so-and-so's the killer? And you're like, come on, I just wanted to make chicken parm. So yeah, the Scream movies, I feel like if they do continue them, I will continue to be an audience for them because I hate spoilers. I hope that they do bring back legacy characters. As a person who grew up on them, I want to see them in these continuing movies. I hope they don't steer away from that completely. But as you say, we shall see.
Absolutely. So hopefully we contributed something a little bit different to the discussion about Scream 5, Scream 2022. I'm not sure exactly what to call it. So hopefully we contributed something a little bit different. And as you could tell, we were definitely gushing over certain parts and wishing others would be a little bit different. But that's what's great about discussing movies, is that everyone has their own opinion and you can just talk about it like civil people and just share your thoughts and ideas and really just get a great conversation going. I think we definitely did that with this one.
Without a doubt. And I think to your point of you loving the meta of this movie, the fact that you're not sure if it's Scream 5 or Scream 2022 is an entire plot point in this movie.
Yeah, that is true. So they definitely had some fun with that. A lot of meta jokes in this one. So I definitely like this one. I definitely thought it was a solid sequel. So again, I'm looking forward to seeing more, and we'll see what they do from here.
We shall see, but I will be in the audience for any future installments.
So again, thank you to everybody for tuning in, for watching this episode of Mitch and Brad's Movie Show, where we talk about all things Scream this time. But next time we're, again, going to be shifting gears, just keeping it diverse, looking at a bunch of different movies, talking about a bunch of different genres, different actors, and different things. So Brad, if you want to give people at home kind of a look at what's in store for next week, definitely a change of gears from what we talked about this week.
Definitely. I'm not sure, too, how many crossover fans you have between Scream and Shakespeare, but next week we will be discussing the tragedy of Macbeth.
Absolutely. So I think it's still going to be a great discussion, and I'd still definitely have a lot to say about it as well. So hopefully you'll tune in next week as well, where we talk tragedy of Macbeth, and we talk about that adaptation and Denzel and a whole lot of other things. So thank you to everybody for tuning in for this one. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, like, do all the YouTube things. I'm not going to mention them all here. And then again, if you're listening on one of the audio platforms, thank you for doing that as well and following us or listening to this episode. So we really appreciate all the support. Just this little show starting out here in our 4th episode, but hopefully a lot more to come.
Yeah, man, I'm enjoying it, and I hope everybody out there is as well. So take it easy.
Absolutely. So we'll see everybody next week for another new episode of Mitch and Brad's Movie Show. And until then, we'll see you.
Bye.